It's a good point.
Yeah, the way we normally do it is that we have the most data from the homes we've done from our custom design firm, so we've learned a lot from those, and it's easy to maintain the relationship with the client. We've only been around for 18 months, so you know, we have a couple homes that are downloaded early from day one and are completed construction, and we're able to monitor those versus the projected energy usage. The one thing that's sort of the impossible variable to always predict is how people use the home. If someone leaves a window open and has the heat turned all the way up, that will affect it versus stealable. But you normally need about 6 months to a year's worth of data to actually see that. And yeah, the energy modeling softwares these days are very accurate. And there's a bunch of sort of reports sponsored by the Department of Energy where they actually build full-scale mock-ups and run those versus their projected energy simulations. And yeah, you know, the physics aren't that complicated where you can't get that far off.
I just wanted to say thank you to the organizers and for the great turnout. That's encouraging in itself. I did come in late, but I also am to dovetail the idea of retrofitting and all the beautiful ideas for green building. It just comes to mind over and over again as I go through the back roads that we're losing our wildlife and their habitat. Keep in mind that you can't really have a green building or green community if we don't have proper land use. And I think Pine Street is one of the co-housing ideals is the tighter land use. But anyway, that was my main thrust, that we keep that in mind and work with our towns to protect our tracks so we do have some wildlife. Thank you.
I guess so I'm interested in how we got here and the money behind why developers built the McMansions and how we've got ourselves into this mess that we're in, and what those factors will be moving forward into the future of sustainability. How we can change the financial equation so that it does catch on in a much bigger and much more national way, so that all of a sudden building green and doing developments and keeping our footprint and land usage and cisterning of water and all the litany of ideas that go into this actually makes sense for developers on a national scale, or are they dinosaurs? Are the Centexes are on the way out, and these young companies are the up and comings, or how do we inform those companies of how to move into the future?
Well, I mean, I think there'll always be developed. It's basically, I think it's consumer driven. People wanted bigger homes. They didn't care about energy, and the developers made money off of that. Now you can blame the Toll Brothers of the world and say that they're terrible people. You could be right or wrong, but I don't think it's a really productive discussion to have. I think what is productive, particularly the way our society works, is to say, how can we incentivize people to do things that are better? And I think, for as much discourse there is about sort of green technologies and how exciting it is to collect water and do all these things, but those really aren't culturally changing ideas of themselves. If we really want to get people to change their mind about what's important to them when they buy a home, you have to talk about a way that they actually value. So one way we found, and probably one of the most important design ideas we ever came up with, is that when we talk to clients, we're not just designing your home, we're designing your mortgage. And people say, well, I would love to go green, but I don't want to spend an extra 10 or 20 grand on my house. Well, you go, well, are you going to pay for that house with a giant suitcase full of cash, or are you going to take a mortgage out? Oh, it's a mortgage. So what if we're going to increase your mortgage payments by $100 a month. It's going to cost you more every month, but we're going to reduce your utility bills by $150 a month. So even though your house has a higher price, it's actually costing you less. And so it's those types of, it's communicating and relaying information in a way that incentivizes people to make better purchases and to demand that when they buy a new home. That's the way that we'll sort of shift and do that. But just saying we need to, collect rainwater, we all need to be green and live in small communities, that'll happen. That'll happen for really progressive people. But get everybody involved, you have to make it make sense for what they value.
How about the code issue? I mean, that being involved in regulations. Public incentivization, is only worse if people take advantage of it.
Well, what's the issue with the code? You see the
Well,
code as
just
a
saying
progressive driver?
Just
or
saying, that everyone must have solar hot water on any new construction.
But that's a dicey subject, because you're only as good as the people that are enforcing or that are actually writing the code. And often the most innovative and thoughtful people and that know the most about these technologies and where they're appropriately applied aren't always the people that are get into writing the new building codes. So yes, if we had all of our smartest and best and brightest writing the building codes, then maybe code would be the right way to do that.
Well, on that particular example, when we were at the Governor's Zero Energy Task Force, we're considering exactly this proposition. But what that means is that you're essentially licensing, or not even licensing, but encouraging the removal of trees, because a very large number of houses are not appropriate because of trees. The idea then that we put a recommendation about tree removal, I can't remember exactly how it was drafted, but I drafted it, so I probably should. But it was, we left it out because we thought that that would be the death panel characterization of our report, because even though it was very well intentioned, and if you read, of course, the way in which various things in the health legislation are being characterized, you can realize how dicey this stuff are, because things get turned completely upside down. And we figured that trying to facilitate solar access and so forth was a topic that time has not yet come, perhaps, because it involves values, as Ben was saying, that maybe people would challenge or misunderstand, or some insidious forces would mischaracterize. So I guess there's a micro piece of paranoia in there, but we felt we had to consider that sort of thing. So we're dealing with all of those kind of issues. But ultimately, as Ben said, when values say that solar access is more important than preserving trees at all costs, then that'll happen.
There's a good example of something similar to that too. In Boston, they decided that they're going to buy all these solar-powered trash compactors. So the idea is that they compact the trash just like the public trash can, and so they don't have to empty them as often, and they're using green energy to sort of reduce their labor. Well, so they decided, okay, all over the city, we're going to use these solar-powered trash cans. Great idea, except they put them in a city that has tall buildings, and 50% of them, I walk by them all the time and they're in the shade. And that's the problem with it. When you legislate things, you have to do it really smart. You have to think of every possible thing how it could get misused and all the secondary ramifications, and that's why it can be pretty tricky. And in many cases, you can actually cause more harm than good by something that sounds as simple as like, solar power is great, everything should have solar power.
I think the reality is, the sad truth is, in this country, we could simply solve a lot of it by raising our fuel prices and keeping them up.
Yeah.
Then the market takes care of it, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to make one comment on the developer point, because I think the big drivers of carbon use in the country are, transportation, housing, buildings, and if you really want to, if this is a question about carbon emissions, if you want to do something across the world, you should just forget about the U.S. and go to India. And we have 5 people right now we're talking to in India, and the housing, there are 45 million homes short right now. The housing shortage there, and so if you think about what's going to happen with carbon emissions, you need to think about developers, and you need to think about other countries. But in the U.S., I don't think the big developers, Centex, Pulte, Lennar, D.R. Horton, are going to change their ways. They're going to start doing Energy Star appliances and say they're doing something more green. The only way I think you can combat that is to do developments yourself, because in the Northeast and New England, we don't have a lot of developments, but most of the housing growth in the U.S. is driven outside of New England. So I think we are very focused on looking at some opportunities to do sustainable, small, more tightly grouped developments in other places. So, and I will say there was a big ka-choom, when the market fell down and a lot of developers went out of business. So the good news is a lot of companies